All right, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. My name is Thomas and I do videos on various educational matters, mostly of the esoteric and obscure variety. And this is no exception. Today is number 76 on the reciprocal system of theory, which is an obscure and esoteric um, theory of everything derived by Dewey B. Larson back in the 20th century up until his death in 1990. The basic idea is that unlike the Greeks, who thought that the universe was made out of atoms, of matter, and or Einstein, who thought that the matter was actually energy by E equals mc squared, Larson says that actually E equals mc squared basically shows that neither energy nor matter can be the most fundamental thing in the universe, because there's something that underlies both of them if you can change one to the other and vice versa. And he says that that thing is motion, really the c squared part. Uh, the universe is made out of motion, and motion is the relationship between time and space. Motion and time and space are reciprocals of each other. They both exist in 3 dimensions, and they both have discrete units, meaning that there's a minimum unit of time and a minimum unit of space. And 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time is the speed of light. The speed of light is not the maximum speed of the universe, as Einstein says, but it is the null point or the midpoint or the neutral point of the universe. And there's an entire universe, or half of the universe, that is moving faster than the speed of light. Larson calls that sector 2, or the cosmic sector. And then there's also an entire half of the universe that we're familiar with that's called the material sector, or sector 1, that is moving slower than the speed of light. Now, in the slower than the speed of light, sector 1, we see that space has 3 dimensions and time is progressing. It's always getting later and later and later. But in sector 2, those relationships are reciprocal, or they're reversed. You have to reverse the roles of space and time when you cross that unit speed or speed of light boundary. So in sector 2, you have 3-dimensional time, or what Larson calls coordinate time, and you have space that is progressing. And that can be seen in space progressing, meaning that space is always getting further and further and further away. In the same way that time is always getting later and later and later, space is always getting further, and that is the progression of space, or the flow of space. And that can be seen by the Hubble telescope, has been seen by the Hubble telescope, as the recession of the distant galaxies. And so, when you cross the speed of light, you have to invert the roles that space and time play. All physical phenomena, units, are measurable in terms of space and time only. For example, speed, 10 miles per hour, 10 miles of space in 1 hour of time. That is a reciprocal relation between space and time. And energy is time over space. It took me 5 minutes to move that thing 30 feet. 5 minutes of time, 30 minutes of space, 30 feet of space. And then but there are also 3 dimensions of time and space. So, for example, matter is time to the 3rd power over space to the 3rd power. And you can plug these values into all of the classical equations of science, of mechanics, in chemistry, and the units will check out. And if they don't, then it's a strong presumption that they're wrong. And so that's basically how it goes. Sector 1, the material sector, is made out of atoms and molecules, and they build up in complexity by bonding, what Larson calls aggregation. And when they get to their most complex level, which is DNA, containing a few billion atoms per molecule, then that DNA molecule becomes eligible to be controlled by a sector 2 entity. And when that happens, the sector 2 entity takes control of the material entity. That forms, the two of them together forms the life unit. So life is a combination of a material and a cosmic entity. And then the life unit can grow or develop via evolution, so-called, until it gets to its most complex level, which Larson says is the intelligent human being. And at that point, the intelligent human being is eligible to be taken control again by a sector 3 entity, which sector 3 is really the region that is entirely independent of space and time. Beyond space and time, the metaphysical universe, or what others maybe would call God, or the spirit world, or the spirit, and Larson calls that sector 3. If he had to do it again, he might call that sector 1, and then call the other sectors sector 2 and 3. But I would suggest that he's also referring to this, although he doesn't say this as far as I know, that he's also referring to the realm of light that is the midpoint. The midpoint is I believe, where the sector 3 elements come from, because all of the Lorentz contractions and the relativistic equations basically go to 0 or to 1. 1 over 1 equals 1. And so that's beyond the space and time. And anyway, as a result, the human being is kind of in between these two controls. That sector 2 is controlling the human body by directing it toward survival, whereas sector 3 control is directing the human toward ethical behavior or good behavior. Now, sometimes those two controls work together and there's no problem, but sometimes there is a conflict between the two, and the human being has to choose which one of those controls they're going to follow along with. And that was discussed a lot by Larson here in this book. We're looking at his final book that's called Beyond Space and Time, and this is where he gets into the sector 3 stuff and the metaphysical stuff. This was his book that came out after he died. It was published in 1995, and this, again, his final book and his first effort into metaphysics. Most of his books are on physics and astronomy and chemistry. And so free will is the, ability to choose between this sector 2 survival and sector 3 ethical behavior. And then after that, he talked about, in chapter 18, we got into discussion about right and wrong. And there he looked at things like the golden rule, and that these are elements of communications from sector 3, variously called ESP, intuition, scientific insight, or religious revelation. And that, the more kind of he was saying the more kind of universal these intuitions are, the more likely they are to be correct. And he pointed at the golden rule as being kind of the nucleus of the ethical code. And so the ethical code is really like an amalgamation of all of the intuitions that people have had. Now, so it's interesting that chapter 18 is called Right and Wrong, but now we're about to start chapter 19, which is called Good and Evil, Moral Values. So we're going to just start from the top, and I'm just going to read Larson for a little while, and we're going to get a sense of how he's thinking and where he's going with this. Good and evil, moral values. As a physical structure composed primarily of complex compounds of carbon in an aqueous environment, man is beset with physical hazards on every side. If the temperature rises a few degrees above that to which he is adjusted, or falls a few degrees below that level, or if he is fully immersed in water, or if he enters a partial vacuum, or if he experiences a substantial increase in gravity, or if he encounters a high electrical potential, or if he accelerates too fast and stops too suddenly, or if he comes in contact with any one of thousands of common chemicals, or if he finds himself in any of a great many other such situations, he ceases to exist, or at least suffers severe physical damage. When we consider that the range of temperatures in the universe is from absolute zero to millions of degrees, that the range of velocities in the material sector extends up to 186,000 miles per second, that there are pressures up to millions of atmospheres and gravities millions of times as great as that on Earth, and so on, it is evident that the human race is confined to an extremely narrow range of physical conditions and is thus very severely limited from a physical standpoint. Strangely enough, a complaint on this score is seldom heard. Whatever feelings an individual may have when someone dear to him drowns, for example, he does not protest the physical facts. He does not contend that there is anything wrong about the fact that life ceases to exist when the oxygen supply is interrupted. Nor is there any school of philosophy which argues that the existence of an all-wise and all-powerful deity is incompatible with the existence of these extremely severe physical limitations. But the same human beings who accept with good grace the physical limitations to which they are subject, by reason of the laws and principles of the inanimate sector of the universe, are quickly moved to protest when the operation of the laws of chance translates these physical limitations into hardships or bereavements. And they complain vehemently and bitterly about the handicaps and afflictions to which they are exposed because they are subject to the laws and principles of the biological sector. And he quotes Hume here. A perpetual war is kindled among all living creatures. The stronger prey upon the weaker and keep them in perpetual terror and anxiety. But this is the biological law, says Larson. There would be no man to denounce the perpetual war had it not been for that perpetual war which eliminated, or at least retarded, the less advanced in favor of the more advanced forms of life. The same can be said for a great many of the items which Hume claims make the lot of man very wretched indeed. Disease, pain, pestilence, famine, fear, and finally death. All of these are part and parcel of the process by which the primitive single-celled organisms evolved into man. They are part of man's heritage as a biological organism, just as his vulnerability to relatively small temperature excesses or deficiencies is a part of his heritage as a physical mechanism. It is impossible, at least for me, to believe, now he's quoting Joad here. It is impossible, at least for me, to believe that physical suffering is not evil. But, says Larson, this is a fact. Nevertheless, if any moral significance is to be attached to the term evil, suffering and hardship are not wrong or evil, nor are they right or good. Such concepts do not apply to them at all. They are simply inherent features of life as it exists in a space-time universe. As Thomas Huxley puts it, suffering is no accidental accompaniment, but an essential constituent of the cosmic process. The words right and good are used in a great many different senses in the ordinary discourse. But for purposes of a critical analysis, such as the one on which we are now engaged, unambiguous terminology is essential. And we will therefore restrict these terms together with wrong and evil to their moral significance. An action taken in conformity with the laws and principles of Sector 3 is right. The consequences thereof, if not nullified or reversed by a wrong action, are good. Items such as physical hardship will be classified as undesirable and their opposites as desirable. So he's putting up a distinction between what is undesirable or desirable and what is right or wrong or good or evil. It should be recognized, however, that even though physical hardship has no inherent moral implications and is merely undesirable, the deliberate infliction of physical hardship on another individual or failure to take advantage of an opportunity to reduce another's hardship is a violation of the moral code and is definitely wrong. Man does not necessarily have to submit tamely to the natural forces that operate to his detriment. He can take actions to increase the desirable aspects of life and decrease those that are undesirable. He can reduce disease, minimize suffering, enlist the help of power as a means of lightening his labors, and so on. One of the requirements of the moral code is that due consideration be given to the interests of others in carrying out these activities. If man were only a biological organism and nothing else, as an influential school of modern thought would have us believe, then his concern for the interests of others would not only be unnecessary, it would definitely be out of order. There is nothing in the biological realm, from the situation of the most primitive bacterium to that of the most advanced animal, that would suggest that any weight is or should be attached to the considerations other than what is best for me and mine. The law of the jungle is the law of nature. Natural selection should have sharpened those and only those mental abilities which assist man in the control of the environment. Quoting Dobzhansky. And then he's going and he's looking at some of these other philosophers, Thomas Huxley and J.S. Mill. Okay, back to Larson. The existence of evil in the world, the problem of evil as it is called, has been a source of embarrassment to theologians and religious leaders from the very earliest days. And an enormous amount of time and effort has been spent in attempts to devise plausible explanations that are consistent with basic religious doctrine. Efforts, as Julian Huxley says, to evade the dilemmas in which they are landed by the acceptance of an all-wise, all-good, all-powerful God as a ruler of a world in which chaos and ignorance, suffering, strife, and evil are such regrettably prominent features. When the conviction has taken root that there is one God whose power is the ultimate cause behind all things, and whose character exemplifies perfect love and justice, the problem of evil at once becomes challenging and very puzzling. If God is supremely good, it would seem as though all his works would clearly display his moral perfection. If everything that happens in the cosmos is the direct or indirect effect of his purposive power, how can he be honestly conceived of as good? And that was a question that was asked by E.A. Burt, who's a religious theologian. I think he does a lot of Buddhist studies. But okay, so back to Larson. One of the expedients that have been called upon to answer this problem is to postulate that the powers of good are limited, that he rules only over the realm of the good, and that he is opposed by another power, a devil or something of the sort, who rules over the realm of evil. Such a conflict was entirely in harmony with the thinking of primitive people, accustomed as they were to continual strife between tribes or between nations. Okay, we will resume here talking about kind of God and the devil and the problem of evil here in chapter 19 when we take over next time. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.